Oh man, it is so cold out there. But you know what? The weather, it's really putting me in the mood to talk about some snowy horror movies and thrillers that you can check out on cold winter nights like this. Now, this list isn't necessarily going to be some definitive top 10 list because I didn't want to include some of the more obvious movies that I'm sure you know about, like The Shining, The Thing, Misery, Fargo. Instead, we're going to talk about 10 underrated picks for horror movies and, yes, thrillers, because I did want to open things up just a little bit, that you can check out during the winter season. Welcome to the Cobwebs channel, everyone. My name is Daniel. Thank you so much for dropping by on a freezing night like this. I really do appreciate it. And let's talk about these movies.
What did it look like? Tell me, what did you see, Kusang? Tell me!
I see.
At number 10, The Abominable Snowman from 1957. A kindly English botanist and a gruff American lead an expedition to the Himalayas in search of the legendary Yeti. You guys should know by now, I love Hammer movies, and yes, this is an early Hammer horror film. It came out in 1957, the same year that their iconic The Curse of Frankenstein came out, that really kicked off their run of gothic horror films. But this is more in line with the black and white science fiction films that they were making in the 50s before that, like the Quatermass Experiment. This is ultimately a movie about a bunch of guys on an expedition through the Himalayan mountains in the snow. This is an incredibly cold and snowy movie. The weather plays a very important part in this film in their survival, because most of the film is kind of about them being lost out there and the horrors of being lost out in the snow. How do you survive? And it's not till towards the end when we start getting into, is there really a Yeti out there? But to speak about the cast real quick, you've got Peter Cushing as the English botanist. He is so great. Yes, the same year he played Dr. Frankenstein. His star was rising with Hammer, so great to see him. And then Forrest Tucker as the American character, who 50 sci-fi fans will recognize as the lead in The Crawling Eye. That's one of my favorites. Love that movie. Now, this isn't one of Hammer's more exciting movies. It's definitely got its slower parts, and you are sitting there wondering, okay, are we going to get to see a Yeti? Is it going to live up to the hype? Because that's what I was thinking, because this is, it's the 50s. It's before Hammer was really getting into their groove with their horror movies, their monster movies. Is this going to deliver as a Yeti film? I gotta say, yeah, it does. And the end of this movie, I think the best way I can describe it is haunting. Like, the Yetis, you don't see a lot of them. There's not much of them in the movie, but like when they hit, they really are impactful. They really made me believe that this is something very inhuman, part animal, some kind of missing link between. Like, I found the ending of this movie very powerful and in a way that I wasn't expecting it to be. So definitely recommend The Abominable Snowman. I've got it on a Scream Factory Blu-ray. Very cool stuff. At number 9, No Exit from 2022. So while stranded at a rest stop in the mountains during a blizzard, a recovering addict discovers a kidnapped child inside a car belonging to one of the people inside the building, and she has to figure out who among them is the kidnapper. So yeah, this is a recent independent horror film that might have gone straight to Hulu, I think. Hulu is where I checked it out, and I gotta say, it's very effective. First of all, the snow, the weather is the entire reason this movie exists. It is a brutal blizzard going on. They really sell the danger of this weather, and it's why none of these people at this rest stop can go on in their journeys. So it's the reason a bunch of random people who don't know each other have been thrown together. And it is such a scary thought to think, what if you're stranded at a place with people and you find there's a kidnapped kid in one of the cars? Like, what do you do? Do you immediately say something? Do you risk getting killed by that person? How dangerous are they? It's just like an intense, relatable situation. The cast here is great. You've got Havana Rose Liu as the lead. Not an actress I was super familiar with, but I thought she was great in this movie. And just the aspect of her being a recovering addict who actually escaped rehab to be in this situation because she wants to get home to her mother, that threw a very interesting wrinkle into it. And even the way that whole subplot of hers is resolved is like kind of awesome. Like, it's crazy. This movie gets very intense. It's definitely got plenty of twists and turns, all the twists and turns that you're going to want in a thriller like this. Some brutal violence. This is a very cool movie. I gotta recommend it very highly.
Board the windows. Try to hide. They're coming.
Number 8, one of the most quintessential snowy horror films of all time, I would say, 30 Days of Night from 2007, which takes place in a small, isolated Alaskan town that is plunged into darkness for an entire month each year when the sun sinks below the horizon. As the last rays of light fade, the town is attacked by a bloodthirsty gang of vampires bent on an uninterrupted feast of death. You ask any horror fan to recommend a cold, snowy horror movie, I bet 30 Days of Night is gonna be one of their top picks. This is a movie I've actually enjoyed ever since I was a kid. My dad showed it to me at a fairly young age. I guess I was more like a young teenager, but it was very impactful for me back then, and it's just such a great story. Originally based on a graphic novel, the story of what actually happens in certain parts way up north, like parts of Alaska, where yes, the sun sinks below the horizon and there's no daylight for right about a month. And this movie really sells how impactful that is to the residents, how there's a mass exodus. So many people leave there, but anyone who's left behind, they know it's going to be a dark, sad, difficult month. But the kind of people that live up there, they're ready to take that on. Now, in the lead, you've got Josh Hartnett as the sheriff. Love him in this movie. Josh Hartnett, I think everybody recognizes now what an underrated actor he was. He really is great in this. He's got a great story along with his wife, Melissa George, and their struggles in their marriage that they also have to work through while they're working through dealing with this vampire epidemic. But this is one of the most miserably cold movies I've ever seen. It just feels brutally freezing the entire time. The vampires are ruthless. The vampires in this movie, they're a very nice mix between the more like inhuman, monstrous, zombie-like vampires that are very popular today and are not necessarily my favorite kind of vampires, but also more human vampires at the same time. Like, it's a very good blend where they are monstrous, they're inhuman, but they also communicate, they have their own language, they definitely have ideas, and they're not just zombies, like they're thinking through strategy. Very scary looking, like they look human, but not at the same time. The makeup is incredible.
Please, God. Please.
Personally, I am more of a gothic vampire fan, so this isn't necessarily my favorite kind of vampire, but it's undeniably super effective, has an amazing ending. I love the atmosphere, I love the cast. 30 Days of Night kind of rules.
But I really can feel something here, Paul.
So what are we going to do about it?
Number 7, We Are Still Here from 2015. After the death of their college-age son, a couple relocates to a sleepy New England village where all is not as it seems. When strange sounds and eerie feelings convince the wife Anne that her son's spirit is still with them, they invite an eccentric New Age couple to help them get to the bottom of the mystery. So this is one of my favorite haunted house movies of all time, and definitely one of my favorite indie horror films. I've said many times I was really into independent horror around the period of like 2014 through like most of the 2010s, and this was one of the peak films during that period for me. It's one of those haunted house films I really enjoy because you definitely get to see ghosts in this movie, and the film is very creative with how the ghosts look, how they act. They're like these frightening looking burn victims. The director, I believe, said well, he was very influenced by Lucio Fulci's The House by the Cemetery and doing a haunted house film kind of in a crazy way like that. So you get really cool makeup and gore and all kinds of cool stuff like that. So it's very satisfying, just a horror fan's haunted house movie. And for all fans out there of Barbara Crampton, this was one of her first like comeback movies. It was like this and You're Next, where Barbara Crampton, iconic actress from the 80s horror, was really just coming back, and she's great in this movie. You've also got Larry Fessenden as the husband to the weird couple that comes in to try to figure out this ghost situation, and he's really fun and funny in it for sure. But it's got fantastic small town snowy atmosphere. The movie is definitely low budget, but just filming in that New England town in the cold white of winter provides so much atmosphere. So this is a great movie to make you feel like you're inside on a very cold, snowy day and there's ghosts around. Come on, that's the dream, right? You just gotta love that.
I don't know what happened, but there's no engineer on this train. There's nobody on this train but us.
Runaway Train.
Number 6, Runaway Train from 1985. So when a hardened convict and a young prisoner escape from a brutal prison in the middle of winter, they find themselves on an out-of-control train with a female railway worker while being pursued by the vengeful head of security. You know what? I'm actually still pretty cold. I thought I would have warmed up by now. I've just got to make some hot tea. But yeah, Runaway Train is actually a Cannon movie. And if you know Cannon, you know they were a really fun, just like B-movie studio in the 1980s. Made great stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and the American Ninja movies and Cobra with Stallone. A lot of fun, silly movies for sure. But Runaway Train is like one of their most like legitimate films that they ever made, like a great film, not just a fun B movie. Even though I don't really care for that kind of separation, to be honest with you. But you gotta admit, Runaway Train is something different than American Ninja. It was actually written by Akira Kurosawa originally, and he was going to make it and never ended up doing it. So it finally got made as a Cannon movie. That's a really weird fact, but it is such a great film. It's got amazing lead performances from Jon Voight and Eric Roberts as the two prisoners, especially from Jon Voight. I mean, he steals every scene he's in. He is a psychotic, unhinged prisoner who should never have been let out, but he might be just the kind of hardened badass that the people and other people in the movie need to get them out of this horrible situation on this out of control train in the dead of winter. This movie feels freezing. Everybody is bundled up all the time, battling the cold in addition to possibly battling, crashing and exploding in this train. And also shout out to Rebecca De Mornay as the railway worker, who I wasn't sure, like, is Rebecca De Mornay going to be believable as a railway worker? But yeah, she really is good. And John P. Ryan is the head of security, who is almost as psychotic as Jon Voight himself. It's like a couple of just monsters going up against each other. It's a really, really cool, intense thriller. This is one of the movies that's one of the reasons why I didn't just make this a horror list. I wanted to include thrillers as well, so we could talk about really cool movies like Runaway Train.
What are you? The devil?
Wendigo.
At number 5, Wendigo from 2011, which is about a family from the city who decide to spend a weekend at a family's country house way out in the middle of nowhere in the snow. But they have this freak accident where they crash into a deer, and a hunter who is tracking that deer is pretty angry about this. And it sets off this very intense situation of this guy being against them and possibly conjures up a ferocious spirit of the Wendigo. So this is actually a movie that was directed by Larry Fessenden, and it's in my Larry Fessenden collection that I got from Scream Factory, a bunch of cool movies in here. So you can kind of have your snowy double feature of Larry Fessenden, even though he's not actually in this one, he just directed it. But from what I've seen, it's my favorite of his movies he's directed. I think this is a fantastic movie. Now, one of the big reasons I love it is I love the family in this movie so much because they feel so real to me. The parents are played by Jake Weber and Patricia Clarkson, and they feel so natural, so real as a couple and as parents. Not in some kind of perfect, idealistic sort of way, a very realistic way, but I love the way they interact with their kid. And the kid is actually the youngest sibling from Malcolm in the Middle. That's how I originally know him. But I just love the way they interact with him. Like, they really treat him like a person. They don't treat him the way parents usually treat kids in horror movies, where a kid will report something scary like, oh, I saw a ghost or whatever. And they're just like, you're just imagining things, kid. Like, stop lying. But they don't treat him like that. Like, they always take him seriously. They talk to him in such a healthy way, I thought. I felt like I learned a lot about parenting watching this movie and how to talk to your child. I just think it's a beautiful thing. I think this movie's so well written, so well acted. But as a horror movie, it is very intense for sure. And most of the intensity comes from the backwoods locals in the town. And it's not like some kind of anti-country people movie, like they're all like cannibal inbred people or something like that. It's really not like that, but they're just some unhinged people living out in the middle of nowhere, and you got to watch out for them. And it's a very intense kind of movie about that. So like, it would be good. It would be a good thriller all on its own. Good drama thriller, even if it didn't have anything Wendigo. And most people's biggest criticism of the movie is it doesn't have a lot of Wendigo. And that is true, but I don't care about that because all the stuff around it is so good. But I also don't care about that because the Wendigo stuff you get is really, really good. I thought it was so cool. I'm watching this movie thinking this is a very low budget film. It's kind of the same thoughts about the Abominable Snowman. I'm thinking this is a very low budget film. It's taking a long time to get to the monster. I'm not expecting much. I'm just not expecting much from the Wendigo. I don't know if we are even going to see one. I don't think it's going to look very good if we do, but I was wrong. We do see one. It looks really good. I thought they made the most of their very low budget to do a very good job with it. So I love Wendigo. And also this Blu-ray pack also comes with another movie called The Last Winter, which I haven't seen yet, but probably would be a good movie for this list as well. So thank you, Larry Fessenden, for your snowy movies. Wendigo is such a snowy film. It's got sledding. It's got trudging through the snow out in the wilderness. Great atmosphere.
They want to get drunk. They want to have some fun.
You won't let that happen.
They could swallow this town whole and nobody would be alive to tell the tale.
At number 4, Day of the Outlaw from 1959, which is about a mean rancher who is at odds with the local farmers and homesteaders who don't want to let his cattle graze on their land. And just when he's about to have a standoff with them and they've got to stand up to this cruel rancher who bursts into town, but Burl Ives and his gang of murderous psychopaths who want to use his town to hold up for a little while after a robbery. And perhaps this hardened rancher is the only one that can stand in their way. So I actually really like 1950s Westerns, but I stand by including this movie on the list because it is a thriller that just happens to have Western clothing on it. It is a very intense movie. I love the premise. The lead is Robert Ryan, who's one of my favorite just like grizzled old Hollywood actors. Most people probably recognize him as one of the leads in Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch. But he really does feel set up as the bad guy of this movie. And he even makes some certain points in the film explicitly about how like, you people don't approve of me and the things I do, but the evil things I have done have made your way of life, your civilization, this town possible. And that's one of the big themes of Westerns. Like the classic gunfighter is the violent person who does the dirty work to make civilization possible, but then doesn't belong in civilization anymore. So he's at odds with all the good people of this town, even though like he knows he is the evil that is necessary for their way of life, which I think is just such an interesting subtext for this, but especially for this kind of movie where this bad guy is the only one who's a big enough badass to stand in the way of Burl Ives, who, yes, Burl Ives is the snowman from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Silver and gold, silver and...
It's the Christmas season when I'm posting this right now, so there's your Christmas connection. And then his gang are horrific. Like, they are some of the most monstrous villains I've ever seen in an old Western. They just want to... Like, Robert Ryan is the only thing standing in the way of these people burning the whole town to the ground, but not until they shoot and assault their way through everybody. And it is such an intense situation. I love it so much. And it is such a snowy film. It was actually a big influence on Quentin Tarantino when he made The Hateful Eight, which is one of the best snowy movies of all time. Didn't include it on this list because I thought it was a little too well known. But yeah, you're going to watch like people out in the snow with the snow like up to their waist, riding through on their horses where the snow is half up the horse's legs. So deep, deep snow out here. Great Western. Highly recommended for an intense movie night.
私はお前を殺す。
At number 3, The Snow Woman from 1968. So a master sculptor and his apprentice are trapped in a snowstorm after finding a special tree for carving a Buddhist statue. They find refuge in an abandoned hut, but they are visited by the Snow Woman, who freezes the sculptors to death, but takes pity on the apprentice. He must promise to never speak of this, or she'll return to kill him. Now, this movie I just checked out because I just got this Blu-ray box set from Radiance Films. It's a collection of 3 Japanese Gothic movies. And if the premise to this Japanese horror film sounds familiar to you, it's probably because you saw Kwaidan, which is one of the most iconic Japanese horror films of all time. It's an anthology of folk horror stories. And yeah, one of those stories was based on the same folk tale that this movie is based on. So this is just that story in feature length. But if you're wondering if that story can be stretched out to feature length successfully, the answer is absolutely yes. In fact, this is my preferred version of the story. I absolutely adore this movie. It's my favorite film in this box set right here. It's also the same story that the final story in Tales from the Dark Side was based on as well. Something else I love about this version is it assumes you've already seen Kwaidan, which did come first. So while the ending of Kwaidan is a big twist, this doesn't treat it like a twist. It's just telling the story with a lot more room to breathe, a lot more time to get to know the characters, which is all stuff I thought was fantastic. I loved the main character. I love the romance he finds with this woman that he falls in love with and marries, and just their story of trying to overcome certain struggles together, but always on the horizon, the threat from the Snow Woman in the back of his mind. The Snow Woman is basically a spiritual embodiment of winter, a winter spirit. And the segments with her are so amazing. I mean, snow just blowing everywhere, her turning white and blue and cold and freezing people. Like, this is just one of the most satisfying movies for just a freezing cold horror movie for sure. I love this film so much. The Snow Woman is one of my favorite discoveries of the year. Highly recommend it.
Is there something wrong?
I mean, I just wish you could stay and see my performance.
Number 2, The Blackcoat's Daughter from 2015, which is about 2 young women at a prestigious prep school who are assailed by an evil, invisible power when they're stranded there over winter break. This is also one of my favorite modern independent horror films. It's directed by Osgood Perkins, who made a big name this year in particular because he made Longlegs, and he also made Gretel and Hansel, but to this day, Blackcoat's Daughter is still my favorite. I love the story about these girls who are stranded at their prep school over the winter break, so it's all just empty and abandoned, and you've just got such a creepy atmosphere because of that. Completely snowy outside. The dead of winter is very, very thick in this film. And I love the cast. This is the movie that introduced Kieran Shipka and Lucy Boynton to me, who have both become a couple of my favorite modern actresses. Kieran Shipka was actually just in another winter movie this year, Red One, which I haven't seen, but I'm sure it's great, right? Sure, it's very good. Don't need to see it to know that, right? Anyway, I love both of them in this movie. Kieran Shipka especially gives such a creepy performance about somebody who might be communing with the devil. Emma Roberts and James Remar in this movie too. I've always been a big fan of them, so that's very cool. Now, this is a satanic horror film about devil worship, and it is one of my favorite movies in that subgenre because this is a very slow movie, a very slow atmospheric film that gives you information at a very deliberate pace, lets you just sit and wonder for a while what is going on. But partially because of that, this movie has such a thick feeling of ultimate evil. Like, I love a satanic horror film that just makes you feel like the power of pure evil is just infecting everything around it. It's this element of decay, of degrading of everything. And I think my favorite movie that gets that kind of feeling across is The Exorcist 3. Yes, I did say The Exorcist 3. But The Blackcoat's Daughter is another great one. And when you do get these moments of devil worship, these moments of perhaps seeing a demon or the devil, really delivers. It is so creepy. I love the visual representation of the devil you get here. Very subtle, but very effective at making you feel like you are looking at demonic presence here. It's got some very interesting twists and turns to it for sure, as you're trying to figure out like, what is going on with this story, It's kind of jumping around a lot, but the way everything comes together, you may not even get it the first time, to be honest, but once you do get it, it's really, really cool. I love The Blackcoat's Daughter. Still my favorite Oz Perkins movie. Highly recommend it for some cold, snowy horror.
Hank, do you ever feel evil? I do.
At number 1, A Simple Plan from 1998, which is about 3 small-town men who find $4 million in cash, abandoned at a crashed plane in the middle of nowhere. And after some debate, they decide to hold on to the money to see if anyone comes looking for it, hoping to keep it for themselves. Soon, the fear of getting caught triggers panic behavior and violent consequences. So this is a 90s thriller neo-noir directed by Sam Raimi. Yes, that's Sam Raimi of the Evil Dead and Spider-Man fame. And while Sam Raimi is definitely the most well-known for his incredibly stylistic, hyper-real filmmaking, this was him having a chance to do something very subtle, and he proves he's just as good at that as the stylistic stuff. Like, an amazing directorial effort from him. I just saw this movie for the first time. It just got released on 4K by Arrow Video, but actually I just watched it on streaming because my friend Ken at Mid-Level Media gave it a glowing review, and I was like, I gotta see this thing. I've been meaning to see it for years, but his was the final push to check it out. And I loved it so much, I bought the Arrow Video 4K. I thought this movie was amazing. It's a thriller that is so relatable because you can't help but see yourself in this situation. If you did find $4 million in cash, no one is around to see you take it, what would you do? And this really just takes us on the journey of what happens if you do take it? What kind of things will you be forced to do to make sure you don't get caught? Because it's a victimless crime, it seems. You're just taking money that no one is around to claim. But then what will you do to make sure you don't get caught? That's really the question that is asked, and takes us on a fascinating story. I love the cast here so much. Bill Paxton in the lead role, giving a great performance. He's someone that I always root for, Bill Paxton. He's such a great actor, but very rarely got the chance to do like lead dramatic roles, and this was one of his chances, and he does an amazing job in it. Love Billy Bob Thornton as his brother. Very unusual performance for him. And Bridget Fonda as his wife. I went into this movie thinking Bridget Fonda is going to be the wife character, right? You know what I'm talking about. When you watch a movie about men and there's the wife character, she's kind of in the background. Maybe she's the voice of reason, like, oh, you guys, I'm going to tell you what to do. But she is anything but a typical character. Where the story goes with her, I thought was so fascinating. She ended up like maybe being the most interesting character of the film. This movie's got a very cold, snowy, small town atmosphere. Not an idealized small town at all. It's just one of the most like sad, emotional, but brutally intense thrillers I have seen in a long time. And I went ahead and bought it because it felt like it's going to be rewatchable for me. Just a world I like to live in, characters I enjoy spending time with. For all of their horrible choices, they're so interesting to me. So I totally believe I'll be watching this many more times in the future, and it's my top winter recommendation for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, but what are some snowy movies you like to watch in the winter? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you did enjoy this and want to spend more time with me, check out this video I did of some Christmas horror films for some more festive movies. We could talk about those over there. Give a like and a subscribe. I really do appreciate you guys. Try to stay warm this winter, and I'll see you next time.